And yeah, I know. When penalties on the FA Vase.
Switch on.
Okay, we have reached the time to start. So, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of Wokingham Borough Council's Executive. My name is Stephen Conway. I'm the leader of the Council and Executive Member for Housing, Partnerships and the Local Plan. And I'll be chairing this meeting this evening. And I should start with a little apology. You might have noticed I've got rather a bad cold. So if I start coughing or trying to clear my throat, it's not, you shouldn't take that as some kind of significant comment on what anyone's saying. It's just how I'm afraid I'm going to have to proceed. I'm just going to start with a few housekeeping points which I need to bring to your attention. Please ensure that any mobile devices or mobile phones are switched off. And if you are participating via Teams, and it looks as though we have some, I know we will have some participants on Teams this evening, can you mute your microphone when you're not speaking? Thank you. And please also note that the meeting is currently being webcast live. There are no fire drills planned this evening, so if the fire alarm does sound, please take it seriously, leave the building via the nearest exit and gather in Muster Point 2, which is located in the car park to the rear of the building. Sorry. Now, I want to introduce you now to the people who are in the room alongside me and behind me. And I'm going to start, if I may, with the officers of the council who are present, so you know who all of them are. They are arranged behind the executive members who are sitting here. And I'm going to start over there with Matt Pope, who's the Executive Director of Children's, Adults and Public Health. And then we have George Framalico, who is the Director of Place and Growth. And then we have Priya Patel, who's the Head of Democratic Services. Andrew Moulton, who is the Council's Chief Monitoring Officer. And then we have Graham Ebers, who's the Deputy Chief Executive and the Council's Chief Finance Officer. And online, we've also got Sally Watkins. And Sally has a title I nearly always forget. I ought not to, because it's quite alliterative. She's the Director of Corporate Community and Change. I think I got that right. And also, I can see Dave Allen, who's the head of the Council's Communications. So there's also here Catherine Glover, who is the chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee, and Catherine will be speaking in a little bit later on one of the items on our agenda. So that's the officers in the room, and I'm going to leave it to the executive members to introduce themselves and just briefly tell you what their areas of responsibility are. And this week I'm going to start with you, Adrian.
Thank you. Hello, Adrian Betteridge. I'm the Executive Councillor for Active Travel, Transport and Highways.
Hi, I'm Councillor Lou Timlin, the Executive Member for Community Safety and Public Protection.
Good evening, I'm Martin Alder, I'm the Executive Member for Planning and Enforcement.
Good evening, I'm Catherine Harding, I'm the Executive Member for Environment and Climate Emergency.
Good evening, I'm Imogen Shepherd-Bay, I'm the Executive Member for Finance and Governance.
Good evening, I'm Mark Ashwell, I'm Executive Member for Economic Development, Sport, Leisure and the Arts.
Good evening, I'm Rachel Bishop-Firth and I'm the Executive Member for Resident Services, Inclusion and Fighting Poverty.
Hello, I'm David Hare. I'm Executive Member for Adult Services, Health and Wellbeing.
Thank you, everybody. So now we're going to move on to the first substantive item on our agenda, which is apologies for absence. And the only apology I'm aware of, and I think it is going to be the only apology, is Prue Bray. Prue is the Deputy Leader and Executive Member for Children's Services. She unfortunately can't be with us this evening. all other executive members are here, so I don't think we have any further apologies to submit. And then if we could go on to the next item on our agenda, that's minutes of the previous meeting. Is everybody content that I sign those minutes as an accurate record? Yep, thank you. Right, we move then to item 39, declarations of interest. Catherine.
So I have a disclosable pecuniary interest in item 46 of the agenda. As a result of my previous employment with BP, I hold restricted share units in the company, which I'm not yet able to sell, and that's disclosed on my members' interest register. And I've been advised that since the potential ban on all advertising by the company has been under consideration as part of the advertising policy, I must not take part in any discussion or vote on the matter, and I have to leave the room. So.
Okay, well, that's a safeguard against your influencing us by your mere presence, but thank you for that, Catherine. So when it comes to that item on the agenda, you'll get up and go, and we won't take offence and think you're walking out on us. David, you also wanted to register an interest.
I have to declare an interest in item 49 of the agenda about Optalis. I'm not executive director of Optalis, but I believe I can stay and give a report.
Indeed. I don't think there's any problem with that. Thank you. Okay, we now come on to the item on the agenda called Statement from the Leader, and this is my opportunity to update executive members and the wider listening public, assuming there is a wider listening public, on matters of importance. And this month my statement will be brief, but I think is a matter of importance. Over recent weeks, the threat to community cohesion, both nationally and locally, has increased. Divisive language is being used in public discourse, especially on social media, but also in letters to the press. I should therefore like to take this opportunity to appeal to all councillors to ensure that their words and their actions at this difficult time do nothing to heighten community tensions. I should like to remind everyone that many members of our community, particularly amongst ethnic minorities, including amongst ethnic minority groups settled in the borough over many generations, are feeling worried about where the divisive language will lead. We all, as councillors, have a responsibility to act as voices of reason and calm. At times like this, when anxieties are heightened, we should be promoting community cohesion, not community division. I trust all councillors, as leaders of their communities, recognise that this is an important part of your role, and I hope you will speak and act accordingly. Thank you. Right, we now move to the bit that you've been waiting for. That's the public questions part, and the first question is from Helen Palmer. Helen, if you'd like to come up to the table, and you'll need to press the button in the middle of the microphone, switch it on.
Yep.
And if you'd like to ask the question.
All right, thank you. Wokingham Borough Council is committed to following Marmot principles. I live in Woodley. It has been heartening over recent years to observe the council encouraging active transport around the borough. More and safer cycling routes are enticing motorists out of their cars, onto their bikes, feet and scooters to get some exercise and to reduce air pollution for a healthier and greener borough. This has cost the council money, but you did the right thing. Thank you. I note that the new cycle route from Woodley Centre to Palmer Park will go ahead, despite swinging budget cuts inflicted by central government. Before you today is the chance of another step towards a greener, healthier Wokingham. an ethical, low-carbon advertising policy which will bring us closer to Marmot values, a policy which will help people to eat better, feel better, and over time become less reliant on social services. It will help us to thrive. Implementing the policy costs nothing. Other councils have found that similar policies have not reduced advertising revenue, and, like the active travel infrastructure, which does cost money, the benefits will be the gift that keeps on giving. Will the council say yes?
Thank you very much for your question, Helen. Our investment in safer cycling routes and supporting our residents to healthier and greener lifestyles is really important to us. And therefore, whilst finances are, as you say, under huge pressure, we will try to continue to invest in such schemes where appropriate. As you mentioned, our advertising policy is on the agenda for consideration this evening, and you'll be aware that we've taken this policy through our overview and scrutiny committee in June and in September in order to get inputs into the proposed approach. And there is, I think it's very evident, a very difficult balance to strike between alignment to our council priorities, including those of Marmot, and the opportunity that advertising revenue provides to give us an income stream which will help us deliver services for our residents. It's a really difficult balance to strike, as I'm sure you can appreciate, in particularly in financially constrained times. It's quite difficult to turn our backs on the possibility of getting some additional revenue that will help us deliver services for our residents. But we are very mindful of the tension between that financial objective and the Marmot principles. Now, we're aware that some authorities have introduced additional restrictions in their advertising policy. Most authorities, including many of our local neighbours, maintain alignment with the national standards and guidelines to ensure that the management of arrangements are consistent and to ensure they can maximise income opportunities. Now, we understand some authorities introducing further advertising restrictions have not seen a reduction in income. But our understanding is that these are not in many ways comparable to Wokingham. They're larger councils with much bigger commercially attractive areas in their geography, and therefore we believe adding further constraints would almost certainly see a detrimental impact on our financial opportunity in Wokingham. However, the decision on this matter is not one that I can take individually and respond to through this question. It's going to be a matter discussed later on, and I know my colleagues, several of my colleagues will want to speak on this, and I think we will then make a decision on the basis of that discussion and the report we've had from Overview and Scrutiny. Thank you, Helen. Would you like to ask a supplementary question?
Yes, I've got one here, but I think you've partly answered it, actually. So I'll just cut it down a bit. Is there any independent evidence that there would be a loss of advertising revenue? And by independent, I mean data or sound evidence-based information which has come perhaps from the experience of other councils, but which has not been provided by lobbyists.
Yeah, I understand your concern about evidence that's been provided by lobbyists operating on behalf of the advertising industry, and that is a quite legitimate concern. We are not basing this assumption that we could lose income or are likely to lose income on that kind of evidence. We obviously have looked at what commercial operators think, but we've also tried to get much more independent judgment based on what other councils have found. But as I said it in response to your original question, we do need to bear in mind that Wokingham doesn't have big commercial centres in the same way that places like Bristol or London have. So we can't make, or even Edinburgh, so we can't make direct comparisons very easily with our situation and theirs. In our case, if we were to go well beyond national guidelines, it's likely we would put off some advertising agencies from wanting to engage with us at all, especially if they could go to a neighbouring authority which didn't have those restrictions. So we do need to be aware that that would almost certainly mean financial loss for us. Now, that doesn't mean in the end that this is something we won't look at carefully, because we do need to try and strike that balance. But I think in financial terms, the advice we're getting from our officers, having looked at this carefully and thoroughly, is that they anticipate a financial loss if we were to go and incorporate wider restrictions than national policy. But that's their judgment, and we have to obviously listen to professional advice. Okay, thank you very much. Now, yours is not the only question on this subject, so I'm afraid you're going to have me answering all the questions on this subject. So I think the next one is actually from Claire, although I don't believe Claire is...
She's not able to be here this evening. She's a nurse. She's on a night shift just started. So I'm asking a question on her behalf.
Do you want to come up to the table? Is it Richard?
Yeah.
Thank you, Richard. I just should let you know, Richard, because I don't want you to suddenly feel cheated of the opportunity, that because Claire isn't in the position to ask the question herself, unfortunately there isn't an opportunity for a supplementary question.
I was aware of that. Yeah.
You knew that. That's good. So if you'd like to ask the question on Claire's behalf, Richard, then I'll do my best to answer it.
Okay. I'll be asking it as if I was her, as it were.
Yes.
So I'm a resident who also works in Wokingham Borough, and I'm a member of Adblock Reading and Wokingham. As a registered nurse, I've spent 20 years nursing people with ill health caused by smoking, drinking alcohol, poor air quality and obesity due to poor diet. Of the councils who have brought in more extensive advertising policies, in no case has loss of revenue been proven. In the only case where a potential loss was suggested, the report was written by the outdoor advertising firm JC Derso. Research on the effect of banning high fat, sugar and salt advertising by Transport for London found there to be a cost benefit to the NHS. The obesity and climate crises are worsening. Your team has created a brilliant policy which upholds your values and would be a great example to other councils, and is also the right thing to do. The Oversight and Scrutiny Committee's concern was on the cost to the borough. If there is no evidence of a financial cost, and with the benefits and leadership it would show, how can you not adopt this policy?
Well, thank you, Richard, for presenting Claire's question. So my answer is to both of you, really. And as you've just suggested, the council has taken time to try and understand the options and implications of restrictions on our advertising policy, including taking the proposed approach through Overview and Scrutiny Committee on 2 occasions. The executive will, of course, as I've already mentioned, and as I'm sure you're very well aware, be considering this and making a decision later this evening. I'm sure you will be aware that we're faced with very significant financial challenges, which mean that we have to make difficult decisions on how we utilise our limited resources and how we try and maximise the revenue streams that are available to us. And our research has shown, and this is to some extent, I'm afraid, just going back over the ground I've covered in response to Helen's question, our research has shown that the proposed approach aligns with national guidelines and with the majority of other local authorities, including our local neighbours. This is the approach proposed by the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. We're of the opinion that because the level of local footfall and demand, unlike other authorities, which in places like Bristol or London, because our situation is so different, restrictions would impact financially more here than they would in those other places where there are larger commercial centres. So I think we have to approach this assuming that we would have an income loss, but obviously we then have to put that in the balance alongside all of these other factors. So I think, although we can't, in the nature of things, present you with hard evidence of that loss, because what we're doing is trying to look into the future. That's a very difficult thing to present you with evidence from our own experience. And as I say, the evidence from other places is difficult to read because it's not comparable. They're not comparable in size and commercial area. But we're going to discuss this more thoroughly as an item later on our agenda, and I hope you will stay to listen to that discussion, and I hope it will, by the end of it, offer you some insight into our thinking and what we're going to try and do. Okay, thank you very much. So the next question is from Nick Hudson. Hello, Nick. And welcome here. I understand you're the Minister of Woking Baptist Church.
That's correct.
Your
yes.
question answers it, in fact.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
it's
indeed.
very good to see you here, and thank you for submitting a question.
Thank you.
You'll have heard from the previous questions. When you've given your question, I'll ask one of my colleagues on this occasion to give you an answer. It'll be Adrian. And then you'll have the chance to ask a supplementary.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So, in 1774, the year that Woking Baptist Church, where I am minister, and I'll slip in, and where we wish to be an active agent for community cohesion. So, thank you for your statement, which I definitely welcome. When that was founded back in 1774, the quickest mode of transport was horse and cart. And Milton Road was one of Wokingham's key thoroughfares long before car parking became an issue. Today, hundreds of people across the community use our building 7 days a week, and our Sunday congregation numbers around 200. Our volunteers generously give their time for all sorts of events and activities, often up to 4 hours at a time. Many of our members or visitors are either young families, the elderly, or those with mobility issues. We note the consultation into a resident parking permit scheme which would affect Milton Road. Currently, the parking spaces between Poppy Place and Milton Gardens on Milton Road are not residents parking, but the consultation's maps are ambiguous about what will happen there, one suggesting they may disappear. We're very concerned about the impact this would have on our hard-working volunteers and our users. Please can we have an assurance that these non-resident parking spaces will be excluded from parking zone W3 and their use remain unchanged from the present arrangement, which includes unrestricted parking on Sundays.
Thank you, Nick, for your question. I can understand why you couldn't possibly tease out all the detail from what's quite a complicated proposal covering many different areas. So I will explain. The current proposal is for Milton Road for all parking spaces along that section, except for the existing disabled bays, to be converted to shared use bays. Our shared use bays are planned to be available for residents with permits without any time restriction, and for visitors for a limited waiting period of up to 2 hours. These restrictions in the current proposal would apply Monday to Sunday between 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. The intention behind this shared approach is to strike a fair balance between the needs of residents and for reasonable periods for visitors, including those attending services and activities at the Baptist Church and other nearby community facilities. Fixed term limits such as 2 hours have the additional benefit of enabling a turnover of spaces in high demand areas, which might otherwise become monopolised by longer term parking. Now, this detail is part of the consultation, and I hope you and others have responded with your concerns to the consultation. If you haven't, I would be happy for you to write to me separately with your comments. The project team is currently reviewing every response received before any final decisions are taken on specific bays, once they've carefully considered all the consultation feedback.
Okay. Thank you.
Do you have a supplementary, Nick?
Yeah. I think that our experience is that the parking spaces that I'm referring to further down Milton Road between Popley Place and Milton Gardens aren't currently used by residents in the evenings and weekends because they're generally pretty much empty in those times. So there would be real value for us in those being retained as unrestricted, particularly on Sundays, obviously, but during the week also. And it would be great if that could be considered as part of the consultation.
So we'll certainly, if that's been fed in already in the consultation, we'll certainly be considering that. If you'd like to write with me just summarising those points in the issue, I'll be happy to feed that into the consultation separately.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nick. Now the next question is from somebody rather well known to many members of the executive. Al Neil has a question. Hello, Al. Very good to see you again. I think you know the drill about how you do this, don't you?
I hope so.
I should just let you know, just in case you're surprised, I'll be answering the question on Prue's behalf because, as you know, she's not here. Yeah. So I'm afraid I was very pleased that Adrian at least had handled one of the questions. So this one will be mine as well.
Okay. So the draft community governance review adopted at full council recommended that Area R, which contains Pearman's Copse, remains in Shinfield and is not moved to Early. This area is the non-residential open space sort of hinterland attached to the areas J and K that are recommended to be moved into Early. The decision appears to go against the government's guidance about CGR, which talks about the importance of the natural space around communities and the physical demarcations of major roads like the M4 motorway. But given the recommendations of the Community Governance Review Working Group, can the Council correct its related documentation? So I've called attention to this because parts of the Council seem to believe that Pearman's Copse is in fact already in Lower Early, even though the CGR Working Group assess or enforcing it to remain in Shinfield. The Borough Council's Countryside Service website states that Pearman's Copse is a small area of ancient woodland in Lower Early, covering 2 hectares. And in the recently adopted asset register on pages 56 and 58, it states that Pearman's Copse is in Lower Early. So would the Council like to correct these documents and properly assign the open space of Pearman's Copse to Shinfield?
Well, thank you for that question, Al. You're correct. The Council's draft Community Governance Review recommendations left this non-residential land as is within the Shinfield parish boundary rather than proposing to move the boundary so it would sit within Early. The Borough Council's working group carefully considered the proposal when it came to them in July, but concluded that moving the boundary would create an inefficiency by having different boundaries between parish and borough wards in that area. The formal consultation on the draft recommendations remains open until the 13th of November, and I'm happy to pass your views on to the working group for their further consideration before the final recommendations are considered by Council in January. Should the final recommendations mean that Pearman's COPS is unchanged, I'll try and ensure that other council services update their information to show the site being within the Shinfield parish boundary. Do you have a supplementary, Al?
Yes, thank you for that. Yes, just to say that I mean the current boundary between Earley and Shinfield follows the historic track of Pearman's Lane. I mean this feature has been preserved through the Shinfield Studios site on the other side of the M4, and paragraph 83 of the government guidance on community governance states that as far as boundaries between parishes are concerned, these should reflect the no man's land between communities represented by areas of low population or barriers such as rivers, roads and railways. These need to be likely to remain easily identifiable. For instance, factors to consider including parks and recreation grounds which sometimes provide natural breaks between communities, but they can equally act as focal points. So I would just suggest that, I mean, that adding Area J to Earley without Area R fails to comply with the government guidance. And if you're looking at the parish outline of Earley with just Area J added, it gives the appearance of a sort of unsightly growth or carbuncle appended to the southwest corner of the parish, whereas Pearman's Copse area in Area R is already considered by WBC to be part of Earley. So would you like to reconsider the proposals for the Shinfield Earley boundary?
Right. Thank you for that, Al. I'm going to draw your attention to the fact that the consultation remains open until the 13th of November, and you've given a very detailed justification for your point, and I think it would be good if that were captured in the consultation so that the working group can make a decision with all the information available to it. So I'm afraid I'm going to ask, have you submitted your own observations to the consultation?
Not yet.
Well, I can see them readily written in front of you, so those would be welcome. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Right. And it's now Anne, I think, for the final question. It's good to see you again, Anne. That's it.
At the last overview and scrutiny meeting, a figure of £40,000 was quoted as projected lost income from restricting specific kinds of advertising as listed in the new advertising policy. This seems to me only a possible loss, not a definite one. I find it hard to believe that there will be such a loss, as this has not been reported by other councils which have restricted similar adverts, where presumably other less harmful products have been found to be advertised in place of the banned ads. My question is this a figure provided by Trueform as the amount that the council would lose, or a figure that Trueform have implied that they themselves would lose if they couldn't find ads to replace the restricted adverts, which I find unlikely?
Well, thank you for that question, and apologies that my answer is going to sound a little bit like the answer I've given already to the two earlier questions. The first thing I just need to, again, say that I've said already is that, of course, in answering this question, I don't want to preempt the discussion and the decision that the executive will be taking shortly on the report from Overview and Scrutiny and the original report and how they're going to proceed. As you state, the reports that have been through the Overview and Scrutiny Committee to help shape and form the proposals we have today explain that our best estimates of the impact of the initial restrictions illustrated in the report was that it would reduce the expected income by up to £40,000 per year. This figure did come in part from our commercial partners, but also from wider research showing the value of different types of advertising and their relative market share. The figure quoted was the financial impact to the council, not to the delivery partner. This can, of course, only be an estimate, but it is based on the best information available to us at this time. And at a time when the council faces unprecedented financial pressures, we will need to consider carefully these kind of losses. We can't just ignore them and hope they wouldn't happen. And we do need to kind of balance that against the very good points that have been made about the importance of Marmot principles and health and climate emergency. These are all very relevant considerations for us as well. Now, the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, as you know, took the view that the national standards provided an appropriate level of control and standards that the council, for the moment, but do want the council to lobby for stronger national policy, so Wokingham is not put at a disadvantage to other authorities who are in the main taking a similar approach. And I think we'll see what the outcome of the deliberations are later on this evening. But I hope you, along with your colleagues, will remain for that discussion. I'm hoping we won't be too long before we get to it, so you can hear the views expressed. Okay? Thank you. You have a supplementary.
I do. When Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, has said that fossil fuel industries should be banned from advertising, does the executive think it is right to receive income from advertising fossil fuel products that are causing pollution, ill health, extreme weather and the extinction of species, including our own?
Yeah. Thank you for that, and you're obviously referring here in particular to not just public health but climate emergency issues, and those are very much matters we're going to be having to consider and weigh in the balance alongside those financial considerations I've just mentioned. We are very aware these are really difficult and weighty decisions we're going to have to make. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, I think that brings us to the end of public questions. That brings us to the end of the public questions. If we can now, I believe I'm correct in saying, Priya, that there are no parish and town council questions and no member questions, borough councillor questions. So that means we can move rapidly into the matters for consideration for the executive this evening. And we start with the Regional Care Cooperative decision, which begins on page 15 of your agenda. This was a report that was going to be presented by Prue. And again, I'm afraid in her absence, you're left with me in my debilitated state. So I think everyone is very acutely aware of the escalating costs of funding children's placements, particularly for children with complex needs. There is a shortage of provision, and there are a lot of companies making a lot of profit by charging very high prices. Hundreds of thousands a year is now commonplace. And I've heard of one local authority looking at £2 million a year for a single child. Sadly, high prices are absolutely no guarantee of high quality. Regional care cooperatives are part of a recent government response to that situation. And they'll consist of local authorities banding together on a regional basis to try and exert some influence over the market. What a dreadful word to have to use when talking about provision for vulnerable children. Between us, we can, between the councils, that is, we can potentially share resources, perhaps providing some of our own provision within the region, more than we might manage working individually. and also using our collective bargaining power to negotiate with other providers. So I hope you can see this approach of working in partnership with other councils has the potential to bring us considerable benefits in the face of these private providers charging very large amounts of money. And I think it is undoubtedly in Wokingham's interest to join the South East Regional Care Cooperative. This is, I think Graham would describe, and I would describe also, as an invest-to-save initiative. The money we put into this will pay us back dividends. The cost is relatively small, and the savings are much greater. Even on the Conservative model, Conservative with a small c, I should say, model officers have used in the preparation of the business case as set out in the report. The funding will come from the existing transformation budget. So I therefore ask the Executive to support all the recommendations so that we can formally join the South East Regional Care Cooperative. And you'll see the recommendations on page 15 of your agenda. Before I go to those recommendations, anybody wishes to say anything? Good, I hope that indicates a good level of support. So if I just read out the recommendations. The first is to, well, it is for us to approve, one, Wokingham Borough Council entering into an agreement with the South East Regional Care Cooperative in line with 12.1.7.2 of the Constitution, which will continue to, and this will enable us to continue to monitor, review and update. We're also asked to approve £100,000 investment for 2026, 27 and 27, 28 to be offset by savings. The proposed purposes, objectives and scope of the South East Regional Care Cooperative and how it will deliver improved outcomes for the children and secure better value for money, and to note that a briefing regarding the South East Regional Care Cooperative was provided to Children's Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the 17th of September. The most important one there, I think, is approving our joining. So can I ask you to all indicate whether you're prepared to support these recommendations? That, I'm pleased to say, is unanimous. Thank you. So we now move on to the next item, item 45. This is joint public protection arrangements. And I'm going to ask Lou, as the executive member responsible for this area, just to introduce this report. Thank you, Lou.
Yes, so hopefully this is quite straightforward as well. So we are part of a public protection partnership, which we had a peer review that completed in January that concluded that the partnership offers an effective service to residents, delivering efficiencies and better service resilience than we would be able to achieve on our own. Currently, we don't actually have member input into the management board, so we have no input into policy development, service accountability or priority setting, which is identified as a gap. This paper therefore recommends, and I'll just point out two things. One, that we enter into a new free authority agreement until March 2029. It's not recommended to enter into a longer agreement at this time just because of some uncertainties around the future of local governments. It also recommends that we become a full member of the management board with voting rights. And I think it seems eminently sensible to me that we support this.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We are affected by the decisions made by the Joint Public Protection Board, and not to be represented on it and not to have a say in it seems very unwise. So the recommendations you can see on page 25, I won't read them all out. I think Lou has effectively summarised them. Is there anyone who wishes to say anything on this? Okay, can we go to the vote then, supporting this recommendation? Thank you very much. That's great. That's everyone. And now we move on to what most people of the room have been waiting for, item 46, advertising policy. Yes, Catherine has to leave us at this point. Now, I'm going to be introducing this item. As you can see, my name is attached to the report, although the author of it, of course, is Graham Cadle. And I want to start off by thanking the Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee for their consideration of this item, in fact twice, and in particular at their meeting on the 29th of September. And they've come forward with recommendations. And I've asked Catherine Glover, who's the chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee, if she could join us, and she's able to do so online, so she can speak to this item on behalf of her committee and explain to us why her committee came to the recommendations it did. So, Catherine, it's very good of you to join us. Could you just explain to us a little bit about the rationale behind the recommendations you made? Or your committee made, should I say?
Yeah. Yes, thank you, Stephen. As chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee, I have the pleasure of presenting the committee's feedback on the advertising policy for consideration by the executive. The committee has considered the proposed policy twice, as Stephen just said, and I have to admit that it has been a really difficult balancing act. The first time the committee saw the proposals back in July, we were really keen to add restrictions to the policy to reflect the council's vision for a fair, green, safe and connected borough. By September, however, when the proposed policy came back to the committee with all our added restrictions, the negative effect on Wokingham Borough Council of the government's proposed reallocation of core funding was becoming impossible to ignore. The committee feared that putting additional restrictions on the advertising the council could accept would further reduce its ability to deliver essential services. And if the council cannot deliver these services, it cannot achieve its vision of fairness, sustainability, safety and connectedness. Members also worried that just when the council is trying to introduce new advertising platforms around the borough, advertisers might be put off by the restrictions and could just go elsewhere, maybe taking their more desirable advertising with them. There are many influences on what people buy, not solely WBC advertising. So the council has no written advertising policy at present, and members felt that adopting national legislation and guidelines that are mentioned in the report would be a step forward from where we are today. And we're looking forward to reviewing the new guidelines, the new government guidelines early in the next year, and lobbying the government for further amendments to support the council's priorities. I don't think that there's any conflict between this recommendation and the council's commitment to sustainability, public health and tackling climate change, because any reduction in revenue would reduce our ability to deliver those policies. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Catherine, and thank you to your committee for its deliberation on this matter. I'm going to open this up to colleagues for their views, and then I'll try and summarise, and if it's possible, come forward with a course of action that we might follow. So, who would like to speak on this? Quite a few colleagues want to speak. So, Mark, do you want to start us off?
Yes, please. Thank you, Chair. As Executive Member for Economic Development, don't boo me, it's incumbent on me to give a slight case for the defence, really. I had a long chat with Anne of AdBlock. We go back a long way and share the same values, for certain. But I think we agreed that we don't want to put off potential advertisers en bloc, ad bloc, en bloc, but guide them towards advertising that matches our values. I mean, I've got a couple of sort of extreme examples, but we attract BMW and we advertise their electric cars. We attract McDonald's and we advertise their veggie and vegan options. So it's sort of ad block, but maybe ad support is what I think we're looking for. And commercialisation, unfortunately, as Caroline has just said, is not a luxury right now, it's a necessity for our council right now. My case, slight case for the defence, Stephen.
Thank you, Mark. Imogen, I think you were the next.
Yeah, sure, thank you. I mean, as I understand it, this only affects the small number of advertising locations that Woking Borough Council own. It's not all advertising across the borough as a whole. And there are plenty of locations that are not owned by Woking Borough Council, which will largely be unrestricted in what they can advertise. At the moment, Woking Borough Council has no policies at all for moderating its advertising. So anything we have will be better, I think. This policy report complies with the national recognised standards, which do indeed include regulations for climate change, health and gambling anyway. It complies with nationally recognised good practices, and it's a good baseline, even if it's not ideal. It is not the end, it is where we begin, as long as we can agree the proposal to keep looking and amending the policy going forward. That's what I'm hoping for anyway, as and when we can get an agreed position. I could see that we'd have very little latitude to object to what the committee is, the Scrutiny Committee has already suggested to us. So I welcome what Councillor Glover has suggested, and I can see that we desperately need the revenue income from this advertising policy. And as councillors, we need to ensure that we have enough money to pay for the services that our residents desperately need. So delaying the policy to try and make it perfect will probably do more harm than good in this instance. We are looking at a potential shortfall over the next 3 years of 47 million. So we have to be prudent in our decision making. And as long as we can agree to continue to look at and examine any potential variations going forward, I personally would be happy to support this report as a baseline with room in the future for improvements.
Sorry.
So,
Thank you.
I think I'll leave it there.
Well, you made one very important point. You know, we haven't had an advertising policy. This is the first time we'll have one, and I do not imagine it's going to, whatever we decide, it's going to remain in its agreed state. It will evolve and modify. I'm quite sure of that. As inevitably, national guidelines will change, and I think there's going to be a review in January, and I'm very interested to see what comes out of that. David, I saw you indicating you wanted to speak.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Stephen. First of all, I'd like to thank Claire for sending all us councillors a letter, which certainly for me rang a lot of bells and made me think and just question what we were doing, because it is important. We are in Marmot Borough. We are interested in public health, and things like that are important to us. But as Imogen has said, if we don't have any money, we can't support children, we can't support those with needs, which we have to do as well. And the balance is not always easy. And sometimes you have to say, well, let's support them and see how this goes. And certainly something that has been said as well is that this is a first try, and we will look at this and review it, and I'm sure it will change and develop. We also are going to lobby government, and I'm sure they will look at things. But at the moment, if we say, well, we're not going to do a lot of things, but all the other councils do, it gets harder for us, and people don't invest in us in that way. So I personally think it's important to look at and to understand, to go with overview and scrutiny and say, yes, we're going that way. That is the government's agenda. Something I will say at the end is, looking through this agenda, Appendix A 4.3, it says we will encourage environmental responsibility, healthy living, positive lifestyles and the local economy. And I'm sure that all of us want to do that. And we'll do that as much as we can so that we provide as good a service as possible to the people of Woking.
Yeah. Thank you, David. Adrian, you were the last person I saw wanting to speak on this.
Thank you, Stephen. I'm really proud to be part of a council in a borough where people take these things seriously. Our commitment to things like Marmot is very clear, and I'm very pleased that residents and members of the council have considered these issues very carefully. That said, I think as has come out this evening, we don't really know what the impact of different variations of such a policy might be. I think it's pragmatic and sensible that we go ahead with, for our first year, the national guidelines. We say we're going to review it, and all the issues that have come up in this debate, I think, should be on the table for that first review when we see how in demand our advertising is, what sort of advertisers we're attracting, our ability to influence what they advertise. As that all becomes clear, I think we'll be in a good position to look at this again.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I just wanted to say a few things as well. I think the point has been well made that we haven't had a policy. So it's good news, I think, that we have a policy now, or we will have a policy once we've approved one. I think it's very clear that Marmot principles and financial considerations are in tension. It is very clear. We are, unfortunately, facing a major financial challenge with the government potentially withdrawing up to £50 million worth of our funding over the next 3 years. And that, to put it in context, we receive roughly £21 million of government core revenue support every year at present. By 2028-29, that would have probably fallen, if nothing changes, to just £4.5 million. So this is a very significant loss of our revenue from the withdrawal of this government funding. So it is a really challenging financial environment. Now, having said that, we don't truly know what the impact of adopting any of the variations we could go for would be. We just don't know how much income we might lose, whether we'd lose any, whether we'd lose more than we think. This remains very uncertain. So I think any decision must include that review process. And I know from the point of view of all of our questioners on this subject this evening, you will want to be engaged in that review, and we will want you to be engaged in that review. I view this as not the end of the story, but the start. We will be evolving this policy over the next year and more, and I personally would welcome your involvement in that process. If you're willing to go on the journey with us, we're very willing to invite you along. And I think we welcome your input. We obviously will want input from a whole variety of people as we move forward on this subject. And we do need to be mindful that there is a government review taking place. David said we're going to lobby. He's slightly jumping the gun. We haven't agreed we're going to lobby, but I'm sure we are going to agree we're going to lobby. And lobbying the government would be along the lines, I think, of trying to persuade the government as it broadens its own definition of what would be inappropriate advertising to take serious account of public health and climate emergency issues. So we will be making that point explicit to government. And we will be in a safer position, I think, in terms of defending our policies if national guidelines change to reflect what you're asking for and wish for. And we will try and do our best to lobby to that aim. So as we've been engaged in this discussion and in advance of it, I sketched out some ideas about how we might just tweak our the recommendation that appears in your agenda. And the recommendation is very straightforward, but I think we just need to add a little bit to it. And I would like to put to colleagues that we might amend the recommendation so it now comes in 3 parts. The first is we note the recommendations made by the Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee on the 29th of September and approve the proposed advertising policy as it appears in your agenda, which is Appendix A, in line with existing national guidelines, noting that the government intends to publish amended national advertising guidelines in January, or rather in early 2026. I hesitate to say January, it may not end up being January. We also, I think, should note that I, as the leader, will write to government, will determine who the relevant minister is, and I will write to them, encouraging them, asking them to broaden the categories included in the National Advertising Guidelines to include considerations around climate change and health. And that, just so we ensure that we capture this idea of a review, that this is a process, not an outcome. The third recommendation is that a review of the advertising policy be undertaken in 12 months' time. And this won't be in the wording of the recommendation, but just to assure all of those who've asked questions on this subject this evening and the people you represent, because I know you're not just asking these questions on your own behalf, we do want you to be involved in that process of helping us review this to see whether it is still fit for purpose or whether we need to go farther. So we welcome your involvement in that process. So, is everybody clear about what the new amended recommendations are? And with those in your minds, can I ask for your support for those recommendations? Thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you very much. Right. Although that's probably the most weighty matter for us to discuss and deliberate on this evening, it is not the end of our agenda. We now have 2 items on our budget, or rather, sorry, on our financial situation.
Wait for a few minutes while everybody...
Well, I'm waiting for Catherine to come back anyway.
As well,
yeah,
so
yeah.
Shuffle around a bit.
Where about?
You're ahead of the YouTube stream, so
right.
I didn't
Okay.
realise you finished.
That's presumably to enable people to edit me when I go wrong. Okay. Right. That has slightly thinned the audience. It's not you, I'm sure, Imogen. It's the subject matter, not you. So the next item for us to consider is the revenue monitoring 2025-26 quarter 2. So Imogen, would you like to present this report for us?
Are you ready for me? Okay,
I am.
yes, right. This report shows our position at the end of the second quarter against our medium-term financial plan predictions. We are currently projecting an overspend of 1.02 million, which is an increase over the 898,000 predicted at the end of quarter 1. This area under pressure the areas most under pressure are adult social care, children's services and place and growth. Given this, our directors and our officers are working hard to bring this overspend under control, and we're still early in the financial year. I am confident this will be addressed in the coming months. The area of adult social care is expected to overspend due to the complexity of looking after older people and people with learning difficulties. Predicting future needs can be very challenging in this area. Children's services are showing signs of getting their home-to-school transport under better control, which I know is something we've been working on as a council, but the cost and complexity of looking after children in care continues to increase. There is also slowing growth in the use of independent schools, which heavily contribute to this area. There is a smaller predicted overspend in place of growth, which includes highways and transport, which has not managed to meet the savings targets predicted. In the resources and assets area, we're also seeing a £150,000 overspend due to the impact of Treasury management of the dedicated schools grant. This is a ring-fence loan that is proposed to provide support for children with high educational needs, but the interest is paid from council tax revenue. As this loan is growing to meet demand, so is the interest payments. The DSG, Dedicated Schools Grant Loan, currently is expected to be at a deficit of £55.6 million at the end of March next year. This is not unusual for councils to be in this situation, although we are waiting to see how central government intends to fix this problem, and the current situation is not expected to change until at least March 2028. The government does indeed need to recognise the situation is broken, and we continue to lobby for a permanent and more practical solution. The most immediate concern is being that interest payments of the loan do indeed come from revenue, and it has to be covered by council incomes. The housing revenue account is a relatively small ring-fenced account for our social housing and is currently in a favourable position of £9,000. However, there are future risks around the maintenance costs. Our general fund balance prediction is still quite healthy, and we will continue to work to improve the end-of-year position. Overall, I do not see any alarm bells in our current financial situation. That's recommendation 1. Do you want to say anything on that before I move on?
Well, there are only 2 recommendations, but
okay.
you should finish, I think.
Recommendation 2 is the write-off. We do indeed, as an executive, need to agree a write-off of a business rates debt of over £2 million for Bracascio, formerly known as Asset Arts. This was a company based in Winners Triangle who got into trouble. Our officers followed the debt collection processes and made many attempts to try and claim the arrears, and were initially somewhat successful in getting some of the payments. Our enforcement agents visited them several times to make claims before the company finally went into receivership in October 2024. Action was taken by HMRC to liquidate the company, and they have now concluded that with no prospect of any more funds being extracted from the depleted company. So we need, as an executive, to agree not to pursue these claims any further. As the debt forms part of the council collection fund, the council will now incur a 49% of the cost of this write-off of £981,000, with 50% falling to the government, central government, and 1% falling to Berkshire Fire and Rescue Service. The council holds an earmarked reserve called the Business Rates Collection Fund for bad debt provision, which will absorb this debt, so it does not affect the council revenue budget monitoring position. Thank you.
Thank you, Imogen. That's very helpful to have taken us through the background to both the recommendations. I should say on the HRA, just very briefly, that yes, you're right. It's in surplus narrowly, but its long-term viability does depend on growth. It does depend on adding properties to it, new properties with less liability to repairs and maintenance. Also, I think your comments on the Dedicated Schools Grant were absolutely right. This is a major challenge to all councils that have responsibilities in this area, and the overall point about our modest overspend, in-year overspend at this stage is you were absolutely right, and this is not an unusual situation. We faced it last year. The challenge here is perhaps slightly larger, but we did bring that down significantly by the end of the year, and I'm hoping we will do the same on this occasion. So the 2 recommendations are on page 43 of the agenda. Note the overall forecast of the current position of the general fund revenue, budget, housing revenue account, that's the HRA, and Dedicated Schools Grant, DSG, illustrated in the executive summary and appendices attached to the report, and approve the write-off of a business rate debt totalling £2,003,075.99 in the name of I'm going to Bracascio. I was struggling with that one. Bracascio Limited. So can I ask for approval of those 2 recommendations? Thank you very much, everyone. Now we're going to move on to item 48, capital monitoring. But before I invite Imogen to present this, I just want to just make a very small change to the wording of recommendation 3E, we need to add on the end of that a few words that I think are very important, and that is to be wired from the Community Investment Fund. So that is to be wired from the Community Investment Fund. Okay, Imogen.
Thank you, Stephen. Yes, okay. Capital monitoring. It's normal to adjust our capital programme throughout the year, and this quarter is no different. We must closely monitor our capital funding to ensure all spending is necessary and all schedules, and check that there have been no changes. As of the 30th of September, there is an £8 million worth of saving identified across the capital programme, and these are listed here in the summary, but generally our approach is to support items that are statutory for our residents, and will make long-term savings or have a grant developer funding available to support them. The full breakdown of everything is in Appendix A. So going on to Recommendation 2, in Appendix B you can see a full list of the projects that are being fully or partially carried forward into future years. I'm not sure if anyone wants to discuss any of these further, but it includes bus shelters, traffic signal upgrades, Barkham Solar Farm, safer routes to school, and Woking Youth and Community Centre. I don't know if anyone else wants to talk about those. On Recommendation 3, the budget adjustments. In this quarter, we intend to allocate S106 funding, which comes from developments towards adult social care accommodation. Finchampstead Parish Council are providing £275,000 for junction improvements at the War Memorial in Finchampstead. We were providing £89,000 for more green recycling bags. Apparently there's been an increase in demand, which is probably good news because people are recycling more at home.
It's very good news.
There will be an NHS grant of £351,000 to upgrade 5 supported living flats in Ryesh Green, and a capital budget loan of £17 million to our housing companies for the delivery of affordable housing, which Stephen has just talked about, which is environment. There are business cases being prepared for this, and of course, and the loan should eventually be paid back. In Recommendation 4, we are approving an additional £1.3 million in year 26 to 27, year 26 to 27, to complete health and safety work on the Early Station footbridge, which I'm very sure is going to be welcome. The condition of the bridge is deteriorating, but it is being monitored. It is highly used by pedestrians heading to Early Station on foot and to and from Woodley. A contract has been tendered and the costs are coming in higher than expected, hence we need to extend the current allocation of funding. It is expected the work will start in Q3, Q4 of this financial year, with further work expected in Q1, Q2 of the year 2026 to 27, but the details of the project will be determined by whoever the appointed contractor is. But that's the expectation.
Thank you very much, Imogen. Some rather good news items in there, to put it mildly. And although it might seem a lot to have to purchase £89,000 worth of green recycling bags, that's a sign of how recycling has taken off, really, since the changes in the waste collection regime. We've seen a really big increase in recycling, which will actually bring the council far more financial benefit than the £89,000 we're spending on extra bags. Is there anyone who wishes to comment on any of the items Imogen's highlighted? I think she's highlighted all the good stuff that we need to be aware of, so thank you for that, Imogen. So therefore, could we move to support these recommendations? And with that reminder that 3E has been amended to include the words environment. Yes. Okay. Those in favour, please show. Thank you. Now, we now move on then to our final item on the agenda, and that's, I think Greg has to leave at this point, or it doesn't have to, but he's choosing to. It's Optalis Limited Local Authority Trading Company report, and it's going to be presented by David.
Thank you, Stephen. And the first thing I want to do is to thank everyone who works for Optalis for their hard work, for their commitments. And I often think sometimes the people at the top get thanked and hear it, and the people down on the coalface don't hear it so much. So I hope that gets to the people on the coalface, that we as an executive want to thank them, because I believe that's really important to encourage them and to thank them, and to see what a good job they are doing. This report is, yes, says the usual things, I'm afraid. We are still having to recruit staff. When a member of staff can leave to go and work in a supermarket rather than working, yes, long hours with people, it's about the same pay or even a bit more. It's hard. And that is something that the government still doesn't want to take on, and I think needs to look at and take on, because it's something that's the inequality between the NHS and local authorities is stark, and I think that's very sad. But we do recruit staff, especially nurses, and especially nurses is hard, to reduce the number of agency workers. And the problem with agency is that they cost more, but also they don't often know the people who they're working with. And that makes a vast difference. So consistency is so important when working with older people and people with disabilities. And agency does not always mean consistency. So again, we need to make sure that we recruit as many people as possible. And you look at the figures that are down here, and we have recruited quite a lot of people this year, but we've also had people go out the other end, and that can be the problem. So it's an ongoing problem, but we will look at it, and we will make sure that our pay is as fair as possible for the people that we're supporting. The other things with Optalis, they've obviously increased the number of services they give. We have a new care home that's come on board quite recently in February. So there's more, and that means recruitment again, because some of the staff move on with new managers and things like that. So it is something which is important. But basically, we're doing a good job. We're making sure that we're looking after the people who we're serving, and the overspend is reasonably small. And I know that's difficult because with recruitment and sometimes having to pay for agents and so on, it isn't always easy to get the balance, but we're doing as well as possible. I am proud to present this to you and to look at the recommendations. The recommendations are to note the content of the reports and the continued collaboration between Optalis and Woking Borough Council to support local residents of Woking Borough, and it is supporting the local residents of Woking Borough. And also we want to ensure the ongoing oversight and transparency of Optalis Limited by incorporating a biannual report into its regular reporting cycle. And I think that's important just to look at and make sure that we're reporting. If anything suddenly happens which needs to come here, it will come here. But if we're looking at it every 6 months, I believe that's important to make sure that we're keeping our eyes on the ball. Thank you.
Thank you, David. You've spared me the need to read out the recommendations. You've just read them out yourself, so that's made me slightly redundant. But I would like to just make sure that we capture in the minutes the thanks of the executive to Optalis and all of its staff for their hard work. And your point on the challenges of recruitment is very well made, and it is an ongoing challenge. So to be achieving what is being achieved in that context is particularly noteworthy. Okay, colleagues, I'm not going to read the recommendations because you've heard them once already from David. Those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. So that concludes the executives meeting, but before you get too excited, some of you are staying for an immediately following shareholder committee meeting. That will include Mark, Imogen, myself, and Martin is standing in for Prue as Prue's replacement. So if those of you just named can remain, and the rest of you are free to go and enjoy the rest of